Unbelievable! Stupid Toilet Safety Administration! You can't even take a crap at IHOP without a 40-minute line!
And as he always does this time of day, this day of the week, on the phone with us now, on the air with us now. You know, I use on the phone with us now too much. I'm going to have to condition myself not to say that. But this is Mr. Christopher Marola. Chris is a political consultant. The name of his business is Red Momentum Strategies, and his website is redmomentum.com. Now, I think I've asked you this, but you know how he got into the whole blue and red?
I believe the media used those colors at one time. Red represented the Democrat Party, actually.
The first Reagan election, Reagan versus Carter, Carter
Right.
was red and Reagan was blue. On the second election, when Reagan ran, it was red for Reagan, and that's where the red states came from.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Well, I think the Democrats didn't want to use red state color for their they didn't want to be represented by the red color of the red states because of the red connected to the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I believe that's probably an accurate reading, and they could subtly, the media, that is, they could subtly make a jab at Reagan, red for Reagan. So, but enough of, we digress. Now, you have an article that was published a couple of weeks ago that where somebody's saying we just need to can the Constitution, and, you know, for all practical purposes, we've been canning it, but why don't you go ahead and discuss the article? I'm going to sit back and enjoy you.
Yeah, there was a gentleman who was discussing the fact that he wanted to get rid of the Constitution, and I think we may have touched on that before. That was around December. It was a gentleman who was a professor, of course. Go figure. Some of these professors think they own the world. Every theory and every idea that they create is something we should all just support. It was a Georgetown law professor named Louis Michael Feldman. He just wanted to give up on the Constitution. And I like what your point is, and I'd like to explore this issue or this topic a little further.
Yeah, go for it. I'm just going to sit back.
In the weeks to come. Before I do, let me just say this. With all the talk of the budget and so on, let's not forget that the conservatives in the House, the representatives, the U.S. House, the U.S. Congress, are offering a much better budget than anyone out there. The Republican Study Committee recently proposed to balance our budget in 4 years. And they do it with some very, very good pro-growth policies. First of all, they return to discretionary spending that is lower than 2008 levels, so that's a big move forward. They cut non-defense discretionary spending by $6 billion over 10 years, and they make some cuts to entitlements, which is pretty bold because that's usually the third rail, cutting entitlements. But they also raise the retirement age of Social Security up to age 70 for those taxpayers who are 51 years old and younger. So that's pretty bold. And they also propose a flat tax code where individuals can choose to pay only 2 tax rates for personal income tax. They reduce the corporate tax to 25%, and they get rid of loopholes, and they get rid of the death tax, and they get rid of the alternative minimum tax. How about that?
I think those are all good suggestions. I would probably stair-step the raising of the retirement age for Social Security rather than just, bang. But I don't think that legislation has any chance of getting past Boehner.
Well, in fact, they do have a slow phase for the retirement age. It wouldn't be overnight, but so they are following your advice there. Whether or not it gets through the leadership or not, you're right. It's hard to say, but at least we have a conservative wing, a Reagan wing, within the U.S. House, the U.S. Congress, that believes in free market principles. And when many people say, oh, the Republican Party is just as bad as the Democrat, I say, stop, look at the Republican Study Committee. They are the largest committee on Capitol Hill in the U.S. House. They are the most powerful committee on Capitol Hill or in the U.S. House, and their influence is significant. So, let's not throw in the towel. I understand that the Democrat Party, as I've said a whole bunch of times, they've gone over the cliff. They've crossed the Rubicon decades ago. There's nothing to salvage in the Democrat Party anymore. There may be some good people out there who are registered Democrats and vote that way and should reevaluate how they vote. But when the party leadership and the politicians are examined, it's easy to simply say there's nothing left to salvage of that party. But the Republican Party has a significant portion of good, strong conservatives who really do believe in free market principles, and they're worth, holding on to, and they're certainly worth, appreciating for all of their efforts.
One point I did want to make. I wish that this budget of theirs went after the defense spending as well, because if you talk to anybody in and around that defense structure, they'll tell you, there's a whole lot of waste in the Defense Department. In fact, we just earlier in today's show went over $60 billion of waste over there in Iraq. And to think that we can't save money in the defense budget, to me, is just, I applaud them for wanting to balance the budget, but they need to get after that Defense Department as well. A lot of these guys, these generals, flying around in Gulfstreams with private chefs, motorcycle escorts when they go to places inside our own borders. Surely we can get rid of a little waste in the defense budget. They need to get after that one as well.
Well, there's waste in every government department, in every budget. So I empathize. I think the reason that the Department of Defense has waste as much as the other departments do at times is that Harry Truman consolidated, he and the Democrats, the Defense Department by making them a whole lot bigger after World War II. And as you know, every time you add another layer of bureaucracy to a department or an agency, you only make things worse. So instead of making the Defense Department leaner and meaner, he made them more cumbersome and more bureaucratic. So it goes back to that time period as the origin, at least I believe, of making the Defense Department, which used to be called the Department of War, he made it too bureaucratic. So, yeah, there's always room for some cuts, but you have to be careful. They have to be surgical strikes and surgical cuts because you don't want to defund necessary defense or any necessary, equipment or anything of that nature, things where our troops may need the money. So that's a factor there.
Well, but I would say, and then I'll give you back the floor, the other factor is a lot of these congressmen, in talking to procurement people, they recognize there's a great deal of waste, and they have a lot of equipment that's heaped on them, a lot of spending that they're required to do because it's pork for some guy's congressional district. And so while they don't want the program or the weapons system, they get it anyway because it benefits this guy's reelection prospects, a year and a half from now. And I think I remember in talking to Senator DeMint, he said, there's just too many of them think their job is to bring home the bacon. And I think that's what goes on in large part with a lot of the defense spending.
Yeah, there is an argument to be made for that. I'm not going to deny it. Although if we're going to cut military bases, I'd rather we start with military bases overseas first before we start looking at cutting bases at home. We have far too many military bases overseas that we don't need. And Ron Paul raised that point in the election this past year about how many military bases we have overseas. something like 150 or somewhere in the neighborhood of almost 200. And it's like, why do we have that many military bases overseas?
Well, I think the 200, it's like 190 countries, over 600 military bases. But one of my military buddies told me that during the Clinton administration, we quit the forward deployment, and now they're realizing it's cheaper to forward deploy. So a lot of the bases we've abandoned, we're now starting to reoccupy. So, we're not reducing overseas bases at the moment. We're adding to them.
That's interesting. Well, maybe we could consolidate. I'm sure there's some bases we don't need any longer, as much as there are some that we have to hold on to. So that would be a good way to look at cutting the defense budget without harming our troops or our equipment, and get rid of some of the bases that we don't need. Let's get back to this gentleman real fast.
We're going to have to do it on the other side of the break. I mean, you got a 12-minute segment, and we are 15 seconds away from having to come out. We're speaking with Chris Marola. Chris is of Red Momentum Strategies, and we'll let Chris carry out the end of the show with us when we come back. This is Alan Butler, Butler on Business, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes.